everybody, and welcome to another episode of A Journey in Boots from Trauma to Triumph. I'm excited already because the scales have shifted in my favor being a Canadian tonight. And I didn't realize that until just before the show started. So if you are this is your first time tuning in, my name is Dorothy Odell. I am co-host of this amazing show. I am the founder and producer of Unstoppable Overcomers Productions, where we are a full service media agency. So for any questions about that, definitely email me at grahamdorothy408@gmail.com or check us out on our website at www.unstoppableovercomers.com. This is the amazing Dr. J Royster, who's sometimes a pain in my ass, but I can't even point to the right thing. Everything is backwards tonight. So Dr. J is the founder and owner of, Semper Modus. So can you tell us a little bit about what Semper Modus is and what you do?
Well, sure. And that'll actually lead into our special guest, because she is one of the therapists that we have at Semper Modus. It is a private practice for all kinds of different therapy, whatever you're struggling with. We have a specialist. It's at sempermodusllc.com. And we basically have a bunch of practitioners on there. We take all kinds of insurance. We're in a myriad of states. We take TRICARE nationally. And our special guest we invited on a couple months ago, but she was in Guam, not Guam. I told everybody she was in Guam. She was not there. This is Dr. Cheryl Chavers. And now I'm surrounded by Kanadas. Awesome.
So you know what we're going to have to do, Dr. Chavers? We're going to have to give it back to her in spades.
I think we should. But you might be able to do a little bit more than me because she is my clinical supervisor. So I got to be careful.
This is true. She has to tread lightly.
But Canada is in the house today, Dr. J.
I get it. You're very kind and it's very clean. I get it.
Yes. She is from Canada, but Quebec. So it's not really Canada. But we won't bust her for that tonight.
Oh, you can bust her ass.
A proud Montreal Quebecer.
Yeah.
Woo-hoo.
She works at a police department. She can bring it. Trust and believe.
Oh my gosh. So this is going to be a fun episode. I can just tell already. We are getting hearts already. So I love that. Mm-hmm. So Dr. Chavers. Oh, actually, Dr. J, this is your guess. You do it. Yes, you.
No, it's not Halloween. I'm teasing. Okay, so Dr. Cheryl, where did it all begin other than Montreal, Canada? Like, how did you come to America? Because it's better, and just, kind of share a little bit about that.
Yeah, first, I want to thank you all so very much for allowing me on your platform just to have a very candid and formal conversation and hopefully to inspire and uplift our viewers as well. So thank you both. I've always wanted to be a social worker, and my dream, my goal was to be a social worker, a medical social worker, to work in a hospital, to help people with discharge planning and to alleviate any of the challenges that they might have as they go home. That was my plan. But what ended up happening was I left Canada to go to the United States, to go to a historically Black college university, Oakwood College at the time. It's called Oakwood University right now. And that's in Huntsville, Alabama. So I went all the way from Montreal to Huntsville, Alabama. Quite a culture shock.
Sweet home, Alabama.
Yeah. All right.
Exactly. And so in my last year of school, I'm there on a student visa, and I ran out of funding. And I did not want to go back to Canada because it's cold. It's cold in Canada. Dorothy, how are you managing in the cold weather over there?
Girlfriend,
you don't even get a break.
It was snowing today, and I'm in shorts, and I have a fan blowing on me because my menopausal symptoms are through the roof. So actually, one of my girlfriends here in town she said, she shows this picture of this kid wearing shorts and basically it's a hoodie in the wintertime and the snow is falling. I'm like, girlfriend, that's me. And she goes, are you kidding me? I'm like, menopause, you're lucky. I'm like,
Yes, that menopause is no joke at all. You guys saw me take off my glasses because they fogged up.
Mhm.
So TMI.
Yeah.
But
I mean, our low was 79 today, so I'm still adapting, So
oh, shut it.
Jeez. Oh, but can I say I didn't understand when I came to the United States. I didn't understand when they shut down the city because there was like one snowflake. I did not get that at all. I was like, are you kidding me?
They don't have the funding for the plow trucks. I ran into that when I lived in Virginia, which is where you live now. And I remember having a snowstorm where we got 2.5 inches and they ran the snow plows for a day. And then they're like, oh, but there's black ice. There's black ice. And I'm like, so what? Like no one, like I think Walmart might have been open from 8 to 5. Like that was it. And I was like, what is wrong with this state?
That was a huge
Michigan.
culture shock. We walked to school and come on, how many feet of snow?
Exactly. Up to our asses, 5 miles, both
6,
uphill,
right?
with
Both
no
ways.
shoes on.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
I just did
like
not.
my Saturday, I think I mowed or I shoveled like 3 times a week, I think. And I've never had to shovel here. Like I don't even have one. It's amazing.
Oh my goodness. But
you
nonetheless,
mow all year round. I will tell you that. You trim your hedges and mow all year round, which is very definitely a culture shock I can attest to. But even in Virginia, like what is it, 50, 60, maybe?
Yeah.
It doesn't really get cold.
No, it really doesn't. It doesn't. Not at all.
I mean, when we hit 50, it hits the news. Like that's pretty important.
It's like it's breaking news, Dorothy. It really is. They shut everything down. Don't go outside. It's treacherous out there because there's going to be one snowflake.
Right.
All my Florida friends last year were bitching, pissing, and moaning because it was 50 degrees.
Yeah.
And so I showed mine where it was 0. And they're all just like, oh my God, I couldn't do that.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, your blood is definitely thicker than ours. Yours is probably tar level and ours is running water. But,
Here in Canada, it's hold my beer or my Timmy's and watch me drive through the snowflake.
Exactly.
I used to pull people out of the snow for fun Friday nights. So I do remember that from Michigan, but vaguely. How did you end up? You ran out of funding. What happened next?
So I was telling you, I ran out of funding, right? So I didn't want to go back to Canada. I wanted to complete my degree. So I applied for every single scholarship that I could find. And finally, I got one. I was like, yes, I can finish school. This is wonderful. But I did not read the fine print.
Oh, no.
It's important when people give you money, you better read the fine prints. There were some stipulations to me getting this scholarship, and it would entail me working in a domestic violence shelter, manning a crisis hotline, going out into disenfranchised, marginalized communities, and doing presentations about domestic violence. I didn't know anything about domestic violence. I didn't know anyone who was experiencing it. And that experience, that year experience, changed my life. And I said, I cannot believe that there are people in my community who are living in their homes in prison, who are suffering in silence, where home is literally a hell for them, in a place that they're supposed to be safe. And I said, I got to do something about it. So it's been a burden on my heart to always want to bring awareness to domestic violence. But after I graduated with this Bachelor of Social Work, no longer did I want to work in the medical field. I became a child welfare social worker. So working with children who had experienced abuse and neglect, trying to prevent them from coming into the foster care system, working with their families, getting services in place, making sure these kids were stable, and the families had the support that they needed. And then I switched hats a little bit, and then I worked with families who their children did come into foster care because unfortunately their family members were not able to keep them safe. And so I did that for a while, and I worked in child welfare for 18 and a half years. And but I still always had a burden in regards to bringing awareness to domestic violence. My mother-in-law and I, we developed our own curriculum called Girl Talk, What Every Female Should Know. And we would go across the country doing this 4-hour workshop to young ladies and seasoned saints coming to this workshop and talking to them about domestic violence. And that was an awesome opportunity. But then our local police chief, he said, you know what, we need some help with domestic violence. We need some civilians to come on board and to work alongside police officers, because what we realize is that one of the top calls for service that officers respond to are domestic related calls for service. These are family members hurting each other, aggravated assaults, and some of our homicides were actually domestic related as well. So in 2020, I took a leap of faith and I left 18 and a half years of surety, 18 and a half years of what I knew. And I got this position at the police department working as their domestic violence specialist. And so it's going to be about 5 years next year. And it was the best decision I ever made. Now, is it hard work? Absolutely. But I get to shine a light on a very dark subject. And I get to help our community put pieces into place to ensure that our community is safe. And so it's been a great experience.
I love that. I used to work at a women's shelter, and the DVCCC was associated within our facility. And so I'm quite aware of that, and I think the crap really became real when I pulled in one day. Because I'm a bookkeeper, so I pulled in. I had nothing to do with the ladies in the back, but there was a police officer coming out with a lady, and she was black and blue from head to toe, hand in a sling. They were taking her down to the station to process her and get her statement. And I was just like, wow, that this is real. Like, this is like, we're hiding women in here just so that they can be safe, right? And so that is scary.
It really is. And so coming on board at the police department, I get to work with victims of domestic violence, educate them, try to find out what are their barriers to safety, and then try to bridge that gap and find resources to help them. I train police officers about domestic violence because oftentimes law enforcement, it's one of the calls that they detest going on. They don't like responding to these type of calls because they may not understand the cycle of abuse. And oftentimes they will go to the same house over and over and over again. And they're like, well, you know what, quote unquote, if the victim doesn't want to help himself, what am I going to do to help them? So I help to train and change that thought process and let them know that every interaction that they have with a citizen who's experiencing domestic violence, it needs to be a compassionate one. They need to make sure that they link them with resources. They need to make sure that they empower them and let them know that we care and you're not forgotten. And it's really essential that victims are linked with resources to be able to help them, because then we can help prevent domestic related homicides. And I do a lot of training in the community, getting rid of those misconceptions that people have that domestic violence is only physical. It only happens to certain people in certain communities. And so by the time I finish my trainings, people are like, whoa, we did not realize how pervasive this issue is in our community and how it affects all of us. So I've never experienced domestic violence, but my mantra is just because it hasn't happened to me doesn't mean it shouldn't matter to me. And this matters to me, and it should matter to the rest of our community as well.
Absolutely. Love that. When I saw that on there, like, I highlighted that today on the post that I had put out. And I love that. A lot of people like, oh, well, if it has nothing to do with me, why should I care? Well, you should care. Yeah. Right? Number one, you can have empathy for them. Number two, what happens if it does happen to you? You would wish somebody was there for you. As somebody who has been mentally and verbally abused, I totally get it.
Not to mention, you go to school with the kids, and the kids mirror the parents' behavior.
Yes, because it is a learned behavior. And each one of us knows somebody who's going through this. When we're talking about statistics, like 1 in 3 women experienced intimate partner violence, 1 in 4 women experience it. It's not if you know somebody, it's who in your circle is actually going through it. And so when we have our blinders on and we're not informed about it, we miss the signs because we categorize people and we say, oh, they look like they have a great relationship. But you're not realizing that they're experiencing emotional abuse, they're experiencing financial abuse, they're experiencing technology abuse. And if you are informed, then you can do what is necessary to be able to help people get the assistance and the support that they need so they can be safe.
We have 3 women on this podcast right now, and there's one of us who have been abused. So, like, those statistics are right on. What else do you do for the police department? Because you do whole bunches.
I do. So I am using my social work skills and I help facilitate their homicide support group. So these are survivors of violent loss. Their loved ones have been tragically taken from them, and we meet on a monthly basis. It's a peer support group. So it's not like clinical per se, but I'm there providing support and making sure that the group runs well and that these individuals have an environment that's safe for them to be able to express themselves and to then provide support to others who have experienced a similar loss. And I'll tell you that being in that space emotionally is one of the most difficult hours of my life that I go through every month. But it is so worthwhile to hold space for people who are hurting and to provide an environment where they feel safe and they feel supported and they know that they're cared about.
There you go. So you were a social worker in the middle of all of this. You met your husband at church, and that's pretty cool. And, because you hear about people like, I want to meet my man at church, but like actually meeting someone who has a man that they've met from church and like stayed married as long as you have, like you pursued a doctorate. Tell us more about that.
That was very, very difficult. So I have a doctorate in organizational leadership with an emphasis in behavioral health. And I felt that that was the best route for me to go because of my social work background, wanting to address the challenges that people have in regards to the behavioral health. And I did a dissertation on my research focused on the influence of self-care in the prevention of compassion fatigue in domestic violence advocates.
Yep.
So we have these advocates, and actually, according to the research, the majority of people who are working with those who experience domestic violence, about 80% of them, they too are survivors of domestic violence. Absolutely. So here they are giving back, right? But who takes care of the helpers? They're trying to help someone get to safety and to stabilize their situation, but who takes care of them? So I wanted to find some common ground. I wanted to find the data that would support these are the steps that advocates can take to ensure that they achieve self-care in order to prevent compassion fatigue.
Which is amazing. And all the while you've had some medical challenges. So do you want to share a little bit about that? Because what you struggle with is very unique. And there's not a lot of people that I hear about who have this. So I kind of want to educate the audience on it, if you're willing.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to share. Yeah, I'm happy to share. I have sickle cell anemia, and it is a chronic and painful genetic condition that primarily affects people of color. And it's where your red blood cells, they are misshapen. They are missing hemoglobin in that they don't have as much oxygen going through them. So, we need oxygen in order to survive. So my red blood cells are like crescent shaped, sickle shaped. So as they're going through the blood vessels, they often get blocked because they're not round and pliable and flexible like your normal red blood cell. And when that happens, it causes a lot of pain, severe pain. Lack of oxygen, unfortunately, will then result in anemia. So I'm frequently very tired. And I'm susceptible to, getting colds and pneumonia and infections. So it's been very difficult. People with sickle cell anemia, they do not have a long lifespan. For a female with sickle cell, life expectancy is 48. And for a male, life expectancy is about 42 years.
Well,
So
we ain't
I
had
am.
that. So, ma'am, you're stuck. I'm just saying, like, we need you.
I'm 50.
I was gonna ask, but I thought, is that appropriate?
No.
Very appropriate. I don't mind.
Well, hell, you
40.
already beat the odds, and now we're just gonna keep going. So whatever.
Right.
Hey, how come we need to talk to Dr. Joe, because I'm sure that there's some kind of cure at the bottom of the ocean.
Well, I'm more than happy to kidnap Dr. Cheryl anytime she wants to come to Florida and do some hyperbaric. Like, let's go. I would love that. Come down here.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
I love to
I got
travel.
2 bedroom. Let's go.
Yeah.
So that would be amazing, because I think hyperbaric would definitely benefit her significantly. And he could do a study and just, do what he does. That would be amazing.
Glad I put it out to the universe.
Yeah, that's a good idea, because we talk about clients, so I don't focus on other stuff. That's all the oxygen we have, during our 1 little hour a week sessions. Unfortunately,
Dr. Cheryl, I got your back.
All right,
I'm having your supervisor here.
My fellow Canadian. Thank you so much for looking out.
That's why you stick together. I do want to say that you also participate in CISM. So can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that leads us into where we're going.
Yeah. So at the police department, the call went out for anyone who wanted to be part of CISM, Crisis Incident Stress Management Team. And so whenever there is a crisis that occurs with law enforcement, we would deploy and then be there to provide support to them, peer-to-peer support, which is really important. So they're not talking to a supervisor. They don't feel like they're mandated. And we're there to listen to them. And then we can, of course, provide them resources where they can get that therapeutic clinical support later on. But for us, it's just more peer-to-peer. We're listening, we're providing, we're reframing what they say, and they feel that they're heard. So that's how I met Dr. Royster. She was there presenting, and I was like fascinated by what she was saying. And I was just like, wow, she's awesome. I'd love to connect with her a little bit more. And then when I finally felt compelled to get my license in professional counseling, I was like, let me reach out to this lady. She doesn't know me, but let me reach out to her and see. I
knew exactly who she was. And 4 people had told me about Dr. Cheryl. So I knew exactly who she was. And she's like, hi, I don't know if you know me. I'm like, girl, people are talking about you. Like, Chief told me, and Lieutenant told me, Joanna told me, like, I already knew. But I wanted her to think, she was unknown or whatever. I told her
but
that.
Dr. J, she responded right away.
Yes.
She responded right away. And I'm so grateful. I've learned so much under her supervision. She's taught me a lot. And I'm very grateful because I could just be candid with her. Even though I've been in the field for a while, you can still always learn something. So I'm learning from her. And I'm grateful that I can process with her. I can bounce ideas off of her. She could put me in my place. Girl, what you doing? No, you're fine. And she just keeps it real and raw. And I can appreciate that. So I'm glad she's my supervisor.
So the first the first 2 sessions that she did with me, it was very interesting because I am so accustomed to having interns who, really need some guidance and support in the session with the client. So when I refer somebody, typically it's somebody I already know, somebody I'm working with, and they're dealing with a specific issue that intern can assist, right? So because we have to know the client before they can have the client. That's how this works. We need to make we are very micromanaging in this stage, just for the simple fact is we need to know what their skill set are and how they work. And what's interesting is, when we first came on with the client, she took it over. I was like, I'm going to shut my camera off. Like, why am I here? Like, she so had this in the bag. And I was just like, I was in awe. And she specializes in grief and loss, which is something that I've always been very nervous about helping people through. It's not something that I'm not certified in, I'm not educated in. It's kind of like transgender type thing. Like, it's not something that I have a certification in. So I'm very careful. Substance abuse, like those are the things that are not on my roster. They're not on my list of skills. So for me, like when she mentioned grief and loss, I'm like, oh, thank God, because that's not my forte. It's not something I deal with at all. And I was so grateful. I'm like, oh, you have a niche. And what's amazing is she created an app, and I'll let her talk about it because it's just, I'm in awe of her. Like her skill set, her compassion level is above anything. And I just keep sending her clients, and I'm so scared she's going to go, I can't take them, because so many people right now are struggling with grief and loss. Like it is almost unmanageable. And to have someone like Dr. Cheryl just slide in and be a saving grace, I can't ask for anyone better. So thank you, ma'am. I appreciate you and everything you do.
Oh, thank you so very much. I appreciate you, Dr. J. Dr. Royster.
It's the same thing. It's fine. But let's talk about your app. Let's talk about like how you specialize as far as therapy is concerned, how you assist those individuals in kind of taking away from the survivor's guilt. Because I know in veterans and police, when we lose someone to suicide, we have so much that we feel responsible for that coulda, shoulda, woulda just debilitates us. I'm speaking from firsthand. I lost my best friend, almost 30 years ago. Next April, it will be 30 years. And she decided to take her own life. And that is something I fought for years and years. I had one of my very close friends who is a therapist, and she just died at the age of 32, and her heart couldn't keep beating, and it just, that loss, that unexpected and that unjust, way to die. It's different if someone, my great grandmother died in her bed is one thing, but when these events continue to occur to people close to us, it's almost unmanageable. So I want you to help our listeners on how to move through some of that.
Yes, thank you so much. And it's so interesting how I came into grief as a specialty, because as a social worker, I thought I knew everything there was to know about grief. I thought I could help people through it, and I knew all the different steps that they should take. It wasn't until I had my own loss, until my mother passed away, September 2021. I said, oh my goodness, this is how people feel when they lose someone who's so close to them. This is a horrible feeling. And I've got to do better. Like I smacked myself upside the head and I had an awakening. Like, this is ridiculous. No one should have to go through this by themselves. I had never experienced that kind of pain before at losing my mom. She died due to cancer. So March, she was diagnosed with fourth stage cancer, stage 4 cancer. And then by September, my mother was gone. So out of that, I wanted to take my pain and turn it into purpose. And I prayed. I was like, God, please help me be able to help other people, because I thought I was doing a good job as a social worker before, but I really wasn't. And so he gave me this grief group called Tears to be able to help people. And so this grief group, we meet twice a year. The beginning in spring we meet, and we meet in fall for 8 weeks. And we've had people from Canada, throughout the United States, people throughout the West Indies who have been a part of this grief group, and has really made a difference. So I'll tell you a little bit about Milestone 5, this grief and loss app that I created. And this was created before my mother passed away. What happened was, one of my friends on a Saturday morning, she called and said, hey, she sent a text message to us in a group chat. And she said, hey, my mom's being rushed to the emergency room. Can you guys please pray for her? And I was like, yeah, I can do more than pray. I'm going to meet you at the emergency room. So I met her there. And instead of them taking her to where her mother was in the back, they brought her into a room and said, sit and wait here. So we sat and we waited. And finally, the doctors came in, and they said that they'd exhausted all of medical interventions, and that her mother had passed away. So that was devastating. And I was there to support her through that, and to console her and to comfort her. And then after that experience, I noticed that she would go on Facebook and she would write how much she missed her mother, and how today was her mother's birthday, and it's her first birthday without her mom being there. And then it was Mother's Day, and she would write on Facebook how she was feeling horrible. And I'm like, man, why didn't I know that before, that it was her birthday, that it was her mother's birthday, that she was experiencing these milestones? If I knew that before, then I could have been prepared to support her, whether that's tangible support or intangible support. And then the idea came to create Milestone 5. Milestone 5 is a grief and loss milestone notification app. So if someone experiences a loss, you are able to put that information in the app, and then you will get a notification in advance that this individual is having a milestone coming up. And then it would prompt you to then provide them support. With over 40 different types of losses that people experience, there is so much that we can do to support them. And what ends up happening with grief is people grieve alone, by themselves. In the beginning, everybody's there, right? They come to the funeral, they do their meal trains, they might give you a card. But after that, about 3 weeks, a month, 2 months after the loss, that's when everyone fades away.
Yeah.
But research shows that's when people really need the support. 3 to 6 months, a year, 2 years after the loss, they still need support. But what ends up happening is they grieve alone. And what I found is that people then start to engage in maladaptive behaviors because of their unaddressed grief. And so with Milestone 5, people know a year, 2 years, 3 years, 6 years, 10 years down the line that you are not forgotten. Your loss is not forgotten. And I've had people say, well, that seems kind of like, it's like a little negative. You know, why do we want to remember the bad times? Well, we do a really good job of supporting people in the good times, but people are not one-dimensional, right?
Right.
So we need to be able to support them holistically in a comprehensive way, in the good and in the bad times. And I think about that individual who has experienced a miscarriage, right? They're going to know when that due date was supposed to be. They'll always remember that. But wouldn't it be nice if you, as their friend, you knew that too in advance? And you could send them a text, hey, I know this was supposed to be your due date. I just want you to know I'm thinking about you. I'm so sorry about what you went through. What about that person who experienced a divorce? I bet you they remember their anniversary for their marriage. They'll never forget that date.
You mean in a bad way.
And they won't forget, you know, when they were served those divorce papers. Yeah. So if you remembered that, you could provide them some support, whether that's
it makes you super thoughtful, and it engages a conversation that they may not have had. I mean, I know we have 5 stages of grief. What is it? Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And the challenge I find most with individuals that are grieving is there's no timeline for that. And some people are like, it's been 7 months. And it's like, so what?
So true. So true.
Yeah.
And our society.
It's been almost 30 years and it still affects me. I still remember opening that car door, you know, to see her choice. Like that traumatized the snot out of me. But at the same time, you know, I felt grief, I felt guilt, I felt everything. And it's still, you know, managing that. Like I don't feel attached to it like I used to, but it definitely still affects me. I'm human.
Absolutely. And so people, we've been taught like, you know, you'll get over it. No, you won't. Because why is it if your mother passed away, you'll remember Mother's Day, that you'll have that tinge of grief wave over you? Why is it around Christmas or Thanksgiving that people start to really feel nostalgic and start missing their loved one? If grief and if time heals all wounds, then that wouldn't be the case at all. You wouldn't feel a certain way. But time does not heal all wounds. You become reconciled to your grief over time. And the way that you do that is through having as much support as possible, telling the story, talking about your loved one. Dr. J, you talk about your best friend, right? Because wasn't she a singer?
Yeah.
Right. So you tell
way better than me. Yes.
Exactly.
She made an album and everything. Like, she was awesome.
Exactly. Tell the story. Talk about your loved one. But in our communities, we don't give people an opportunity to do that. We actually feel uncomfortable. If I were to go to you, Dorothy's, hey, can I tell you about my dead mother? You'd be like, oh, what's wrong with her? You know, why is she talking about it? But imagine
not
if you...
necessarily, not me.
Not you.
Because she'd be like, I'm going to tell you about my dead dad. You ready? Like, let's exchange.
And what's really ironic is my dad died September 14th.
Yes.
And so when you said your mom died September 20th, I was just like, holy shit.
September the 15th, 2021.
My dad died September 14th, 2021. Wow.
Oh my gosh.
I just got goosebumps. You guys are, wow.
And of cancer. My dad died of cancer. So
wow. Yeah, that's amazing. So yeah, I would have you to be able to talk to about my grief, right? I could share with you about my mom or how I'm feeling, and you would check in with me. Like, we'll never forget September the 14th or September the 15th. Never.
Well, considering it's also my stepson's birthday, no, I'll never forget it.
Yeah, you'll never forget. You're right. You're so right.
Never.
So what we have to do is help people learn how to reinvest, but give them space and time to feel what they are feeling. In our society, we just want to numb the pain, right? But that's part of the healing process. You have to feel it. But wouldn't it be great if you had a community of support to surround you while you're feeling that pain, so you wouldn't feel like you're going through it alone?
I also think that grief makes us uncomfortable because we think we need to solve it instead of just be in the moment with someone who is grieving. And I think we look for that instant gratification, that solution focused type environment. And I think that is part of the reason why I don't focus on grief, is because it is a long journey. It is, you know, more gestalt as opposed to Ellis, right? The therapeutic interventions. So gestalt is like sitting in the feeling with the client. Having an empty chair is one of the techniques where you pretend the loved one is in the chair and you say all the things you need to say. And I want to climb the walls as a therapist because it's very uncomfortable for me. That's not my modality. That's not my forte, but at least I know that. But if I do have someone who wants to talk to me about their dad passing or whatever, I can sit in the moment with them. I just don't know how to guide them through that. And that's why, you know, obviously I hired you because you do. You know how to hire, and, you know, walk through that.
Some people just want you to listen and not fix it.
And that is very challenging for me. Yes.
Well, that could be a challenge that you may want to overcome.
Well, of course, as unstoppable overcomers. But I do. I mean, that is something that you constantly work on, right? Just like anything else. You know what your weaknesses are and you focus on them to make them and turn them into strengths. Yeah.
That is so true. And sitting with someone in the, like I mentioned, in facilitating the homicide support group, right? I haven't experienced this horrible, tragic loss, but I'm able to sit in that space and hear them talk about their loved ones, hear them talk about the tragedy, and let them know, you know what, I care. I'm here for you. I am sorry about what you went through. How can I best support you? That is invaluable, but we often don't get a chance to do that long term for people. And that's what's the beauty in regards to Milestone 5, is that we're creating a community of support around the people who are experiencing loss. And it's not just loss to death, as I mentioned.
Yeah, I was learning some certification, and I remember somebody, I can't even give them kudos because I don't remember who said it, but it's like, do you want me to hear you, help you, or hug you? Like, what do you need in this moment? And that has been very helpful for me to grow, Dorothy, and to be able to sit in that. I'm talking about the expertise that it takes to be a grief specialist, a grief therapist. That's on a whole nother level. But absolutely, you know, sitting with somebody in pain who's struggling with their grief and trying to go through the different stages is absolutely something you can do on a personal level. I was just talking about like a therapist level. That's night and day.
Yeah. And then what about those people who've experienced, a disenfranchised loss in terms of if you've had a loved one who is in jail, you know, some people are like, well, that's the consequences of their actions. They're in jail. Yes, that's true. But you're still missing that person. But what
Yeah.
spaces do you have to be able to talk to other people about this loss that you've experienced? What about someone who has experienced an abortion, right? And they may have experienced this loss, but people say, well, you made that choice. So people are not as supportive in helping this person through their loss. So what if there's a space for them to feel like, you know what, I hear you. It still is a loss, even though that was your decision. And it still is very painful. And here's the safe space for you to be able to express yourself and to talk about that loss. That is really
Miscarriages are the same way, I mean, that loss, that hoping of that child, and that person not being able, and maybe after that miscarriage they realize they have a hostile uterus and can't carry anymore. So that's a double whammy. You just lost this baby by your own body's natural design, and then on top of that, you no longer are able to have children. So like there's many levers to just being a woman, but with regard to that grief and that loss and that suffering, and you're trying to talk to your best friend who has 3 kids, right? Like, what does that look like?
That is very, very difficult. I have someone who, their son, unfortunately, was murdered as a teenager. But years later, when that teenager should have been graduating from high school, that father is still receiving mails from different colleges saying, hey, your son should, your so-and-so should be applying. And then the grief starts all over again. The grief that washes over you. So it does not end, but you have to just learn how to reconcile the grief that you're experiencing. So sometimes your grief will be like a small little ball and it's manageable and you're able to maneuver throughout life. And then one day that grief will blow up and it will look like a wall and you're not able to put one foot in front of the other. And that's okay. Take a moment, sit with that until you're able to pick yourself back up and keep pressing forward, trying to overcome the grief wave that comes over you. And I often say, like, grief is like like you're a surfer, right? And surfers like to ride the wave. And sometimes grief will come and overwhelm you. And if you don't ride the wave, you will drown in your grief. And so sometimes when that grief comes over you, you have to sit with it and feel that pain, unfortunately, express it, endure it, and then try your utmost to move forward. And I also say it's important, it's okay to cry. We're in this society where people have been taught, don't cry. You're weak if you cry. Suck it up. Be a man. But tears communicate what words cannot express. Yes. So it's important to take a moment to cry. In my counseling with victims of domestic violence, I will tell them, you know what? Go in the restroom, get an alarm clock, set it for 10, 15 minutes and cry. Cry your eyeballs out. Pretend like you're an Academy Award winner. Let it out. Have that ugly cry. And then when the alarm goes off, wash your face.
Yeah.
Look yourself in the mirror. Say, I can do this and keep on moving. But
you had a very unique situation happened in Virginia, which you and I discussed earlier today, but like there's a debriefing coming up and there's a lot, that rocked the community. And if you want to share, because you saw it on the news, like you can, but it's pretty intense to have an accident like that happen. And then the whole community, like the people who had to respond, and go ahead. You can share.
Yeah. So, unfortunately this weekend, the locality where I am, there was a young boy who was 3 years old. This is on the news, who got a hold of a weapon and he accidentally, fired it, and he is deceased. He died. And that is like, you can't even imagine the pain of the family. Like, it's like, how do you overcome going through something so tragic? And the whole community is kind of reverberated from this loss.
And I think people need to understand the police and fire and those who responded to that call. I don't think the community understands how much that viscerally affects them, because they deal with stuff every day. They get called 100 times. It's very busy in the community in which you live there in Virginia. So like to respond to a child it rocks everything every time.
It
And I
does.
don't think people understand like how much the death of a child affects the people who serve the community.
It really does. And then it's hard because now as police officer, you got to shift the next day. You got to go back out there, right? But you still have that image in your head.
Not the next day after that call. One of the traumas I worked through when I first started was I worked with a homicide detective, and he retired as a homicide detective, but he was a police officer. And there was one situation where he had to respond to a call where a lady forgot her phone, one of the nannies, and they lived on a lake, and the baby was in a stroller and drowned in the lake. And, everybody showed up. Yeah, it was a total accident. It was pretty horrific. But, he had a daughter that age and was very like viscerally affected. And then he's like, he was a new rookie, right? And his FTO showed up and he's like, okay, where do you need me? And he's like, oh, back on patrol. And he was just like, what?
Yeah. And wish that's a lot. I wish we could do more for officers as relates to compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma,
Right.
and their self-care. I think it's essential to be able to do that. But I feel like there's a barrier sometimes because it's like, I just have to do the job. I've got to get the job done. But then we see the side effects of that, in that there's a high rate of suicide attempts. There's a high rate of divorce, high rates of alcoholism. And part of that is they've had to keep their emotions at bay and kind of just do the job. But they've seen some horrific things that the average individual has not seen. And so their self-care is extremely important to be able to do that. And you're not weak, if you're tending to your self-care, if you're ensuring that you don't experience compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue, according to Charles Figley, who is like a leading expert on compassion fatigue, he defines it as the cost of caring. So if you care, you can experience compassion fatigue. And how do we counter that? Is through being resilient, of course, our ability to bounce back, but then also our ability to implement self-care, getting your rest, making sure that you're not
taking the time off you need when you need it. Like I suffer from compassion fatigue all the time. So I definitely have to be very diligent. And Dr. Cheryl lets me know when I need a day off. Like,
yes.
She's very mindful of my energy and what I need when I need it. So I'm very grateful.
Yeah. Yeah. Just try to stay in tune, because when you're constantly giving, sometimes you get depleted. So you need to be poured back into. That's essential.
So give us ways of self-care. What does that look like?
So what does that look like? Self-care. So for me, I spend all day talking about domestic violence. I hear horrible things that people have been through. And so my self-care is sometimes I'll drive home and I will sit in my driveway before I come into the house. And I'll just sit in the driveway and just have some time to kind of decompress. That is me just pouring back into myself before I switch hats. And now I'm mom, I'm wife, family member. And then self-care is also following up and having that peer support, talking about what's going on with you. You're not internalizing it all. Finding a safe individual that you feel comfortable sharing about what you have experienced. Someone who is not going to brush you off, but someone who's going to say, I hear you, I know, I understand, and I'm sorry about what you're experiencing. Self-care is also getting good rest.
Yes.
Really good rest. That is so important. Oftentimes we don't have enough sleep. And our body rejuvenates itself when we get good rest. Dr. J, don't you have a colleague who's like a specialist in, making sure that people get good sleep?
I do.
And how important it
Tell
is?
all my clients, magnesium glycinate, take 3 pills a half an hour before I go to bed. But my self-care is flying Dorothy down here and throwing axes and having some really good food. So she's due. I'm waiting for it to get like -12, and then I'll fly her down just so she'll have a shock to her system.
What you think? What you say, Dorothy? You agree?
I love Dorothy. She's amazing.
Oh, she loves me, all right. Yes,
I do. She knows it.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Self-care
Yeah.
could be listening to some music, having fun, doing something that you like to do, eating some good food. Now you have to be balanced, right? So you can't be sleeping 24/7. You can't be eating 24/7 because then
You're no
And I'm a foodie. I love me some food. Okay, I'm a vegetarian who is a foodie.
I know it's
But,
weird.
So what do you eat then for a vegetarian foodie?
He eats all the salad.
I am also a French fry-aholic.
Yes. Yeah, she does too.
Well, that's why she likes the poutine.
Yes. Yes.
Can you explain what poutine is for our American friends, please?
Yeah, because our veterans listening to poutine is something close to something else, so you need to explain.
Now that's poutine. Anyways.
Okay.
So it is. Well, I do a thin layer of gravy, a thick layer of fries, tons of cheese curds, and then a mound of gravy is poutine.
I'm ordering that tomorrow, so fly down here and let's have some of that.
It
That sounds amazing.
Good. But you have to have it. I think, Dr. J, you need to visit Canada.
Yes.
In order to have real poutine.
It's cold. So, I'll come in winter. She has a golf tournament. I'll go this year.
She said that last year and she never showed up.
Excuse me. I had an emergency this year, ma'am. With all due respect.
So after Dr. Cheryl, you need the golf tournament's August 9th. So come on down.
Yes.
And we can have a group of clinical golfers. There we go. Social workers, clinical workers.
I love it.
As
Therapists.
long as we scramble, I'm good. Best ball.
Best ball.
Okay.
It's best ball. This year we're having a $10,000 prize if you get a hole in one on hole 2.
Oh, very good. That's awesome. August the 9th, you say?
I will contribute to the cause. Yeah, I can whack a ball, but I can't find it. So that's awesome. I like driving the golf.
Bring Norm. You can whack balls and
yeah,
I won't finish that.
Entertaining. Oh, it's all good. It's Norman.
But
Norman. He does golf, so that'll work out.
There's your top guy.
I'll bring Dr. Cheryl and we'll bring a fourth. Maybe her hubby will come. Does he golf?
No, but I'm sure he'd love to try it.
Well, he can do as terrible as the rest of us. It's fine. We don't need to win. We just need to play.
That's true. That is so true. Yes, so true. I don't golf. Actually, my first year of my own tournament, I golfed, and then I didn't. I golfed last year right to almost to the end, and this year I didn't golf. I'm like, putting on an event is enough. I don't need to be out on the golf course.
That is true. I golf and I'm terrible and I enjoy it immensely.
I like the drinking part of it. I don't necessarily like the
driving.
The golfing part.
Drive. It's amazing.
Yeah. I got to drive my husband home because, there you go.
Oh, we'll make Norm drive. It's fine.
There you go. You have a plan. I love it.
We have a plan. We have a plan.
All right, lady. So stay on a minute and we're going to end the podcast unless you have anything else you'd like to add about your amazing self.
No, I just want to thank you, Dorothy and Dr. Royster, for having me on. I really appreciate it. You guys, please check out Milestone 5. It is available on the Play Store, App Store. It is free, and we're going to be updating it. So there's going to be additional features that will add to it, all with building a support for people who are experiencing loss. So thank you so much for having me. Glad to be here.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I was attempting to put it on my phone. That's why I was looking down, because I was attempting to put it on there.
Yay.
So, yay.
All
I
right.
got to
Thank
finish
you.
off the registration. So yes, go check it out, people. Just want to say thank you to all of our guests that were joining us tonight. And since next Thursday is the American Thanksgiving, there will not be a show next week. So go check the replay. And for any of you out there that, are struggling and have nothing to do, go watch our YouTube channel or connect with us. And I'll be watching football with my husband. I took half the day off. So yes.
And anybody that wants to reach out to Dr. Cheryl, she's on Semper Modus's website. You can connect with her there if you're struggling with anything. We take most insurances, and we are in a lot of states now. So we are willing to serve you in any way, shape, or form with whatever you're challenged with. Be safe. Have a lovely, blessed holiday. And we look forward to seeing you the week after, Thursday at 7. Yeah.
All right. Be unstoppable in all that you do. Bye for now.